Bentornati, and welcome back to Dwarf Fortress for Beginners, the series in which I teach you how to play Dwarf Fortress following mostly the in-game tutorials and guides, plus a few tricks I picked up in the last 10 years. This episode is Trading Part 2, finally. Let me remind you that Episode 8 was Trading Part 1, where I discussed the concept of item value in crafted items. In this one instead, I'm going to discuss civilization caravans, your site accessibility by said caravans, and trading agreements. It's a rather short video but very dense of information, and that's why I decided to split from it the actual bartering at the depot, so that's gonna be in a separate video, and then in yet another one, the trading with the Elven civilizations. So to recap, trading part 1 was item value, go check that out if you didn't. This one is trading part 2, civilization accessibility and trade agreements. Part 3 is gonna be trading at the depot, and lastly, in part 4 we're gonna discuss the Elven caravan and their interesting ethics. Alright, so at this point you should have something to trade, but how do you actually do it? As you might have guessed, you first need to wait for a merchant caravan to visit your fortress. The first of said merchant's caravan to show up in your fortress will almost always be the Dwarven caravan sent by your parent civilization. Now there's a small chance that your civilization might become extinct right after you embark, and in that case you may not see a caravan from them in the autumn of your first year. However, don't despair, you might still get visited by some other civilization though. Only Dwarven, human and Elven civilizations send caravans to trade, and only if they're not hostile. Dwarven caravans always visit in autumn, humans during summer, and Elven caravans during spring. All of this, though, depends on whether or not they have geographical access to your site. So let's get a very quick look at the world map and try to understand if your site is accessible or not. So let's see, how do we do that? We click on the world map, then let's click on Center on Fort to try and locate our own settlement. Now this may or may not help. And the reason is, Center on Fort will not go beyond boundaries, so really to put our fortress in the center should have done something like this. However, you can still find your fortress by looking at the tile that is highlighted in yellow. Look at this, this is us, we have a yellow border. The ones in blue signify our parent civilization, the ones in green are allies, and the ones in gray are all the others. So, as I was saying, sites in blue belong to our parent civilization. As you can see in my case, we are very close, so there's really no reason why I shouldn't get a caravan from them. If you look now at the info window on the right portion of the screen while I have my cursor on it, you should be able to read that this is the Dwarven Fortress of Vessel Panthers, and right above the name there's an indication of how far it is from us. In this case it reads a short trip. These other sites in here, with the tree icon, are Elven Forest Retreats. So if we look again, in here it says a short trip, and this is, for example, the Elven Forest Retreat of Tot Earthen. The civilization is called the Climactic Petals. The little houses and castles are instead human towns and settlements. This is the human town of Belted Weald, belonging to the civilization of the Nation of Working. All of these are really close, they are not separated by seawater or tall mountain peaks, so they definitely have access to our fortress. If we take a look, for example, at these little islands though, let me scroll around. Let's see, this is an island, it's called the Island of Stone, and as you can see in there it says inaccessible from your location. Let's scroll around, maybe there's other sites like that. Look at this, this is a pretty big island. Again, if I look in here, this is called the Continent of Disappearance, very apt name. And again, inaccessible from your location. So let's say that our site for some reason was right in here, smack in the middle of the Continent of Disappearance. Well, most other sites, well practically all other sites in our case in this map, would not be accessible. In a case like this, you will only ever see a caravan from your own parent civilization. And again, that is always if your civilization still exists. This is really rare though. You should have access at least to 1 or 2 separate allied civilizations, and their caravans will show up. Alright, let's get back to the fort And at this point, what we need to do is we need to wait for the time when the caravan shows up. And just a few moments later, it's now the 15th of limestone of the year 100, which is actually the year in which we embarked, so year 1 of this fortress, and I received the following message. Although it is a grim reminder of the winter hardships to come, the supply caravan from the common mechanism, our parent civilization, is a welcome sight. Their eyes are alight with the anticipation of inspecting the splendid products of your industrious crafts dwarves. That's a mouthful. Take careful stock of your own stores. What these merchants offer might very well be the difference between a prosperous future and a slow and meaningless death. This message you'll only ever get once per fortress and only when your parents' caravan arrives. Now, let's look in here. This message says that a liaison has arrived. A liaison is a representative of a civilization and will give you some info about the world's political situation and will also strike a deal for future trade. I have a small problem that I just simulated in here though. I've locked the door. So for all intents and purposes, the liaison cannot reach our expedition leader to have the meeting, nor can the caravan access our trade depot. I did this on purpose to remind you that both the liaison and the merchants are entities on the map and they need to be able to physically reach your fortress. If you leave them outside, no trading can happen. But also, that if you forgot to make a trade depot or blocked the entrance by mistake, you can still remedy. The caravan will wait for a full month at your site before going away, so there's definitely time to fix it. Let's come in here and unlock this door, make it passable. Also, I will go to the surface and I will now search for both the liaison and the trading caravan. Let me look for them really quickly. And here we are. From the top of the map, we can follow Caravan Schedules, the outpost liaison. Their current job is attending a meeting with our expedition leader. While they go and do that instead, let's go and find hidden creatures, others. Look, there's pack horses and there's merchants. Also the horses are merchants for some reason. Let's go and find this Mistem Odom arrows in here and let's follow them. They are coming towards our trading depot and now they are unloading all their goods. All this stuff is now in our trade depot and as you can see, it started to show up on the table to the left. At this point, let me pause for a second. Several things showed up in here. This we already know, the outpost liaison has come. A bunch of stuff has happened. Make socks has ended, started raining. The merchants have arrived and are now unloading their goods. Very good. This remains diplomacy. Before I click on that, let's go and find the liaison again. Here they are. Since our expedition leader has a study, they are attending the meeting right there with our outpost liaison. It's not really needed for you to look at this, but I just wanted to show you that it all needs to actually happen. If your expedition leader for some reason is locked into a room somewhere, the meeting cannot actually happen. They need to meet physically. So at this point, I will click in here on diplomacy. The expedition leader Morol Ritsigan meets with the outpost liaison Caravan Schedules. Caravan Schedules, I am your liaison from the mountain homes. Let's discuss your situation. We click on OK. Caravan Schedules, there is much to share. They added some information to the civilization's world info. Now this info might be something like a site has been attacked, another fortress has been created somewhere else, and this is all stuff that will be visible on the map screen afterwards. Again, we click on OK. It says in here, make requests for next year's caravan. They'll charge more for these items. So this screen is meant for you to ask for extra items to be brought together with the next caravan. Every time a caravan shows up, they'll always have an assortment of goods that depends on what their specific civilization has access to. For example, if a civilization has no settlement on a site that can have gold, it means that the entire civilization will not be able to bring any item made of gold. The things you select in here though, they will try and bring in larger amounts, with the promise, of course, of larger profits. Regardless of what you ask, the amount and assortment of goods also depends on your standing with that given civilization. So in the long run, you'll be able to get more and more goods from the caravans. That is, provided you take care of the merchants and make sure that they leave happy with their business. Now, what should you ask for in here? That's a really good question, and it really depends on your situation. Simply put, ask for stuff you'll have trouble making yourself. A few examples are, if you aren't getting a lot of leather, maybe because you don't have hunting figured out yet, or you are struggling getting into animal husbandry, you can select a few pieces of leather in here. Now, different kind of leathers have different prices. If you want to ask for cheap leather, go for really mundane stuff like mule, donkey, horse, cow, sheep, pig, goat, I don't know, water buffalo, and so on. In case you haven't yet mastered the art of farming for pigtails and thus turning plants into cloth, you can get in here and ask for cloth. It's a good idea to always have in stock plant-based cloth and also silk-based cloth. In here I'm asking for cave spider silk, not giant cave spider silk, simply because this will be cheaper. Also, if I scroll all the way down to the bottom, I can also ask for, there it is, cloth made out of yarn. This is usually on the cheap side, and it might be needed for something, wink wink, artifacts. Sometimes I also make requests for precious metals, so I might go in here in metal bars and ask for gold, or maybe for platinum, especially if I notice that there's a peculiar lack of precious metals in my site. And also, especially if I know, for example, that a migrant joined my fortress and they are already a really good metal crafter, so a dwarf that I can use to make really valuable, I don't know, scepters, rings, amulets, and stuff, can be a really good business. Then again, scrolling down, we find instruments. Crafting instruments can be a little bit tricky, so if you're having trouble getting instruments for your tavern or for a temple or something like that, you could ask for more instruments to be brought. However, instruments are usually already very pricey because some of them are made of many different parts that get combined. So the price can usually get to several hundreds to maybe even thousands. So if you were to check some in here, they will ask double the price. This is just so you know. Then what else? If you want to get into animal husbandry, maybe you only have a bull but no cow, you can come in here and maybe just ask for a breeding pair, for example. If you are still having trouble making drinks, you can go on drinks and request, I don't know, Dwarven rum or beer or ale and all that stuff. One thing that I usually request under extracts is milk. The reason is milk is very cheap, pretty much always very cheap, and you can easily turn all of this milk into cheese and then cheese into very good meals. And meals, as you know, make the dwarves really happy, and they can also fetch a pretty price, actually. As I was saying earlier, they are really broken. Now, also request dwarven milk. I promise, it's not as gross as it sounds. It doesn't come from dwarves, it actually comes from giant maggots. Yeah. Another one of my favorite things to request is metal cages. They're usually pretty cheap. This way I don't have to use the metal myself, and I can use them in cage traps. While you're there, making sure you keep stock of cloth, don't forget thread. Thread is useful for example, suturing wounds, but also sometimes in the making of artifacts a dwarf may randomly want to get specifically silk thread, so it's a good idea to keep some in stock. Around here I also see sand. This is another one of my favorites, especially if you don't have sand on your map. Now I have it in here, so it doesn't really make a lot of sense for me to request more sand. However, there's another nice perk to it. Sand always comes in bags, so this is a way to get a cheap bag. Same deal, if you don't have sand, do order also a little bit of glass, for the same reason as discussed. And as the last thing, I will also ask for sheep wool yarn, llama wool yarn, and alpaca wool yarn. And this is all from the stuff that I would normally request. Actually, some of these I just checked to show you, because for example, sand I really don't need in here, there's plenty of sand. There's actually an infinite amount of sand if you have even just one tile of it. Anyway, let's click on done when we are happy with the stuff that we have requested. Well then, we have finalized the import agreement. Feel free to go over the documents, and in here you can see that we actually bargained for the prices of all the separate items, and for some reason we have agreed to pay 183% for alpaca milk, but 211% for Nick Cage as requested. Now, let me say this, is all of this necessary? Do you have to spend all this time requesting stuff? No. This is not mandatory. Hardly anything is in this game. And as you learn how to play, you'll find out what are the items that you can reliably make and the ones that you prefer buying off a caravan and thus you need more of. I personally tend to request a lot of stuff in the first time around, like in the first year. By year 2, usually many of my industries are in a good place. So if this is like too much and I had to pinpoint just a couple of things, if you don't know how to make glass, get glass, and if you don't have silk, get silk. Those are probably the most important things to get. At this point, I click on done. Katan Akuroslan says, let's discuss what we are willing to offer for your crafts dwarfship. A need for crutches is expected, and if you are able to provide some, the caravan will offer 205%. This export agreement only applies to trades next year, not with any merchants currently present. So, for some reason, our parent civilization is having a lot of accidents, forecast a great need for crutches, and they inform us that if we provide crutches, they will offer double price. Now, this product request is gonna be different, generated randomly every year and different for every civilization. So, if it's something that makes sense for you to craft, something that normally fetches a good price, definitely go for it, because you'll get doubled. If it's something silly like crutches, maybe don't even bother. Okay, at this point I can click on OK, and we are done with the meeting. Oh gosh, I just forgot. What is it that they wanted? What happens if you forget what the trading agreement is? Don't fret, click on the world map. Then you can click on civilizations. These are the civilizations that we know of. This is actually us, our local site government. This is the common mechanism, our parent civilization. Now in here, there's a full recap of the trading agreement that was just struck with the Liaison. So as you can see in here, all the prices of the stuff that I requested, which is a lot, and then at the very end, agreed in the year 100, crutches 205%. Alright. This is all for trading part 2, the trading agreement. In the next part we're going to cover the trade depot and the trading interface, which involves bartering, sending gifts, or even stealing from caravans. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again in the next episode. Alla prossima!